Why kids lie, and why that's actually a good sign. Your child looks you dead in the eye and tells you they did not eat the cookie. There is chocolate on their face. You both know it. And yet they hold the lie with complete conviction. Your first instinct is to panic, or maybe frustration. You think, what kind of child am I raising? But here is what no one tells you. That lie is not a warning sign. It is a milestone. The moment your child tells a convincing lie is the moment their brain does something extraordinary. Let that sit for a second. Because everything you were taught about lying, that it is selfish, manipulative, a sign of bad character, was never designed to apply to a 4-year-old who just blamed the dog for a missing biscuit. Science has a completely different story to tell. And once you hear it, you will never look at your child the same way again. To understand why kids lie, you first have to understand what lying actually requires. Not morally, neurologically. Think about what has to happen in your brain for a lie to work. You need to know the truth. You need to imagine an alternative version of reality. You need to predict what another person currently believes. And then, you need to suppress your natural impulse to say what you know and replace it with something else, all in a fraction of a second. That is not simple. That is not childish. That is one of the most cognitively demanding things a human brain can do. Researchers at the Institute of Child Study at the University of Toronto have been studying children and deception for decades. Dr. Kang Lee, a developmental psychologist, ran a series of experiments where children were left alone with a toy they were not supposed to peek at. When the researcher left the room, a hidden camera captured almost every child sneaking a look. But here is where it gets interesting. When asked whether they peeked, the younger children, around 2 and 3 years old, almost always confessed. The older children, especially those around 4 and 5, began to deny it. And by age 6, many could hold the story together convincingly. What changed? The brain. Specifically, what changed was the development of something called the prefrontal cortex. This is the region of your brain sitting just behind your forehead. It handles planning, impulse control, and executive function. It is the part of your brain responsible for thinking ahead, weighing consequences, and managing complex thought. In children, this region is still forming. It is one of the last parts of the brain to mature, not fully developed until your mid-20s. But as it develops, it enables something remarkable, something called theory of mind. Theory of mind is the ability to understand that other people have beliefs, thoughts, and knowledge that are different from your own. It sounds obvious when you say it as an adult. Of course, other people have their own inner worlds. But for a very young child, this is not obvious at all. A 2-year-old largely assumes that what they know, you know. That what they feel, you feel. Their inner world and the outer world are barely separated. This is why toddlers will cover their own eyes during hide and seek and believe they cannot be seen. From the inside, if they cannot see you, you cannot see them. The emergence of theory of mind is one of the most significant cognitive leaps in human development. Psychologists Simon Baron-Cohen and Uta Frith identified this capacity as central not just to lying, but to empathy, storytelling, friendship, and social navigation. The ability to imagine another person's perspective, to model their mind, underpins almost everything that makes us social beings. And lying is the test. When your child tells a lie, they are demonstrating that they understand you have a separate mind, that you hold beliefs they can influence, that they can create a version of events in your head that does not match what they experienced. That is not manipulation in a sinister sense. That is the birth of social cognition. Of course, none of this means you should congratulate your child on a well-executed cover-up, but it does mean you should recalibrate your alarm. Now here is where it gets stranger. Not all children develop this ability at the same pace, and the differences are striking. Children who are exposed to more complex language, more storytelling, more pretend play, and more conversations that involve describing thoughts and feelings, those children tend to develop theory of mind earlier. The research is clear on this. A 2014 study published in the journal Child Development found that children who were frequently engaged in conversations about mental states, what people think, what people feel, what people want, outperformed their peers significantly in theory of mind tasks. The language of inner experience actually shapes how early the inner world of others becomes real to them. In other words, children who are talked to about minds grow minds faster. This has enormous implications. It means that when you talk to your child about feelings, their own, yours, even fictional characters in stories, you are not just being emotionally articulate. You are literally sculpting neural development. You are building the architecture for empathy, deception, and social intelligence simultaneously. They are inseparable. But here is the part that surprises most parents. The children who lie the most convincingly and the earliest are also the children who score highest on tests of social intelligence. They tend to be more popular with peers. They tend to be better at reading social situations. They tend to navigate conflict more skillfully. This is not a coincidence. Think about what a socially intelligent person can do. They can read a room. They can tell when someone needs space. They can soften a hard truth. They can hold back their immediate reaction and choose a response that serves the relationship. All of those abilities draw from the exact same well as lying. They all require modeling someone else's mind. They all require managing what another person believes. The difference between lying and diplomacy, between deception and tact, is not neurological. It is motivational. The brain machinery is the same. Dr. Michael Lewis, a developmental psychologist at Rutgers University, has argued that the capacity to lie is not just harmless. It is a prerequisite for a functional social life. Children who struggle to develop this capacity, including many children on the autism spectrum who have difficulty with theory of mind, often find social interaction genuinely confusing and exhausting. Not because they are less capable in other ways, but because the ability to model other minds, to predict, influence, and navigate them, is something they have to work much harder to learn. For neurotypical children, that capacity blooms almost automatically, and lying is one of its first public expressions. So what do you do with all of this? First, you breathe. Your child is not becoming a pathological liar. They are becoming a person with a brain that is learning to hold two realities at once, what is and what could be presented instead. That is the foundation of fiction, negotiation, strategy, and compassion. Second, you do not ignore the lie. You still respond to it. Boundaries matter, honesty matters. But your response can come from curiosity rather than panic. Instead of treating the lie as a moral failure, treat it as a social miscalculation. The cognitive architecture is working. The judgment around when and why to use it is still under construction. Third, you keep talking about minds. Ask your child what they think a friend was feeling when something happened. Talk about why characters in stories made the choices they made. Narrate your own inner experience out loud. You are not just raising an emotionally literate child. You are accelerating one of the most complex developmental processes the human brain undergoes. And fourth, pay attention to what they lie about. Children do not lie randomly. They lie about things that feel threatening, about situations where they expect punishment, disappointment, or rejection. If your child lies frequently, the question worth asking is not how do I stop this, but what is this child afraid of telling me? The content of the lie is often a window into what they most need to feel safe enough to say. Fear-based lying and strategic lying are different animals. One is a bid for safety. The other is a cognitive exercise. Learning to tell the difference is one of the quieter skills of parenting. Here is the thing no one prepared you for when your child first looked you in the eyes and told you they absolutely did not eat that cookie. That small, clumsy, completely obvious lie was the first time their brain reached out and tried to shape your reality. The first time they understood that you had a separate mind. The first time they realized that minds can be influenced, and influenced in turn. That is not the beginning of deception. That is the beginning of connection. The same brain that tells you a lie today is the brain that will one day choose to protect your feelings, navigate a hard conversation, write a story, comfort a grieving friend, and know when the truth needs to be softened and when it needs to be said without flinching. It all starts with a child, a missing cookie, and a perfectly imperfect lie.
Your child just proved their brain is working exactly the way it should.